So my name is Cary. I'm going to be with you for about an hour. And just to tell you a little bit about who I am, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. I've taught law school for about 25 years, and I was one of the founders of the Negotiation Institute out of New York City. We worked out of downtown Manhattan. The founder, one of the other founders, has passed away, so I'm here to sort of carry on the legacy. Now, it used to be that the concept of negotiation, and you may have heard of this, is that one person wins and the other person loses. That's sort of an old model. I wanted to buy a car the other day, and I was walking onto the Mercedes lot because I've always been a Mercedes customer, and I've been looking for this car for about 6 weeks. You know, we always do our research before we buy something. I knew the exact car I wanted. I knew the color. I knew what options it had to have. I knew the exact model number, and I was prepared to pay $40,000 for this car. Yeah, that's not expensive for a good Mercedes, a brand new car. So I went onto the lot, and the salesperson greeted me, and he came up to me and he said, "Come here, I got to show you something." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, I got to show you this car, you're going to love it. Well, the mistake that person made is he had no idea what my needs were. After I told him I was looking for a C-Class, he said, "Okay, all right, now I've got the perfect car for you. I can give you this car for $35,000. Now, the cardinal mistake he made was that he opened up his mouth before asking me any questions. He assumed something about my position and about my buying power relative to that transaction, and as a result, left a percentage of his commission on the table. So I was willing to pay $40,000, and he's telling me $35,000. If he's on a 10% commission, he just lost $500. So what we're going to try to emphasize today is that in a really solid negotiation, we're going to sort of change the model from what you may have heard of it many years ago. My father was also an attorney, and he said, "You know, Cary, if you go into a negotiation to settle a case," so we did mainly civil litigation at the time, personal injury cases, things like that. He said, if you go into a settlement negotiation and one party's unhappy and the other party's sort of happy, that's a good deal. Well, I would suggest to you that things have changed dramatically. Today we can have a win-win negotiation. Now, you may not be able to win on every single point, but you may be able to win on some point. So some of the things we're going to highlight today are on the board. I don't know how well you can read this or not, but we want to strategize something called the win-win negotiation. And as a matter of fact, towards the end of today, I'm hoping that you'll engage in an exercise with me where we'll actually negotiate for the purchase and sale of a software system. And you'll see how all this stuff works. But in a win-win model, both parties or both sides can win some things. Now, you may not be able to win on price, but maybe you'll win on delivery. You may be not able to win on a service contract, but maybe you'll be able to win on something else. The other thing that I want you to learn is that in a negotiation, you need to be a great listener. Now, the old adage you've probably heard is that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be using our ears twice as much as we use our mouth. That's where the real learning takes place. Additionally, I want everybody to understand something, and that is to assume nothing. Assume nothing about what the other party wants. Because once you start assuming what the other party wants, you're sort of digging yourself in a hole. Just like that car salesperson started assuming what I needed and what I wanted, I basically walked off the lot. That was the end of the deal. I didn't even want to be there any longer because he had nothing of my interest in mind, and all he wanted to do was sell me a car so he could make money. So the next thing is I want to teach you how to ask open-ended questions. The benefit of asking open-ended questions is that you will establish rapport. If you can ask open-ended questions, then you can start learning about what the other person's needs are. And this is also sort of a revolutionary concept. It used to be in a negotiation, we didn't really care what the other person wanted. Now we do. So if you can be very transparent at the very beginning of the negotiation and say, hey, look, this is what I'd love to achieve by the end of today's session. Tell me, what does a win look like for you? Does a win look like a great price for you, or a great quality for you, a great service agreement, quick delivery time? What does that look like for you? Now, hoping that the other side will be transparent and tell you the truth will go a long way towards achieving this win-win model, right? Now, if they're going to clam up with you and they're not going to really tell you what looks like a win for them, then perhaps you're not going to be able to achieve that. Professor DeLong at Harvard University is a great business instructor. He talks about leadership. And he says you have to be able to ask 3 questions. If you can ask these 3 questions effectively and get honest answers from people, you can be a great leader. Same thing with negotiation. First question is, how are you doing today? Seems pretty simple, right? Well, Lee Iacocca instituted this concept of going onto the assembly line at Chrysler, turning things around by simply asking people, how are you doing today? And he really wanted to know the answer. The second question is, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help you do your job better? And the third thing he asked was, well, how could I be a better manager? Those are all very bold questions to ask. Same thing in negotiation. If you're willing to be bold and ask the tough questions, you might have a very, very meaningful relationship with the other people on the other side of the table from you. So if you can model what Dr. DeLong does at Harvard and ask those tough questions, and hopefully you'll have somebody on the other side of the table that's being real with you, you can really transcend this old model of one person winning and the other person losing. And we'll talk a little bit about asking open-ended questions later. And the first rule, the cardinal rule, which I sort of illustrated at the get-go, is never bid against yourself, right? When I went into that car lot, I told you about that story. When I went to buy a car, I was willing to spend $40,000. The moment that joker at the car lot says, hey, I can get you in this car for $35,000, he bid against himself, right? He made a mistake by assuming something about what my needs were and therefore fell flat on his or her face. The other thing is, after never bidding against yourself, and this is at the end of the transaction. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been in a sales situation. Somebody could be selling you a copier, doesn't matter. And at the end of the presentation, they made their presentation, maybe it was a PowerPoint presentation, and they spent so much time telling you what all the benefits and features are of this new copy machine. And then just as you're about to sign the contract, they talk more and they blow the deal, right? You're going to love this machine. This is the best machine you could have. It has everything your office needs. And actually, they've talked way too much. And they've actually talked themselves out of the deal. So at the end of the day, at the end of the negotiation, say nothing, right? Because the first person to speak loses. I'm not talking about the beginning of the session, because of course initially you have to build rapport with people and get them to like and trust you. But when it comes time to getting a deal done, at the end of that negotiation session, all you have to do is simply hand them the contract across the table and hope that they sign. If they don't sign, so be it, right? You can't guarantee that every negotiation is going to be successful. But I almost guarantee that if you open your mouth at the end, you could talk yourself out of a deal, all right? So any questions so far about any of these sort of core concepts? All right, I'm going to talk about listening for a moment. I'm just going to sort of cross some of this stuff out because this is things that we're going to get to later. We're going to go back. And I really think that listening is sort of the key. So does anybody know what the difference is between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question?
Yes, sir. Well, the most closed question might be a true or false or yes or no question. And then absolutely, the questions can get more and more open if you ask for what you like, what color you like. That's a more open-ended question. There's still a limited amount of answers, and you can get even more open questions if you ask systemic questions.
What was your name, sir?
Josh.
Josh, absolutely perfectly correct. A closed-ended question usually can be answered in a true or false way or yes or no. Now, a lot of you are probably too young to remember a show called Columbo that featured a guy named Peter Falk. Now, this inspector, he worked for the police, and he always knew the answer, but he acted confused, right? So if you were in Michigan this morning, how was it that you claimed that you were seen in Iowa? Now, he knew the answer, right? But he played confused. And although he was sort of calling for a narrative, it was sort of a closed-ended approach. Because do you think he was establishing rapport with people? Probably not. They felt like they were being investigated. Now he was using a little bit of a different strategy to act confused. But at the end of the day, he was fishing for information, right? Now, if you can change your strategy and spend most of your time asking the open-ended question, then people on the other side of the table will start trusting you. You will build rapport. Now, there's a guy named Dale Carnegie. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he says that people love talking about themselves, and they love hearing their name. Now, they don't love hearing their name over and over again to the point of being ridiculous, but if you can use the other party's name and ask open-ended questions, you will be able to establish rapport. And one of my favorite questions at the beginning of a negotiation is simply this, and I would write this down. What is a win? What does a win look like to you? What does that look like? Well, a win looks like to me that we'll have a great price, that you'll be able to deliver a fair price at the end of the day. Or a win looks like you're going to give us 100 licenses for this new software program. That's what a win looks like to me. Now, what have I done? I've established rapport by allowing the other side to respond to an open-ended question. Now they're not feeling very defensive. And this is a fresh approach to negotiation. This sort of destroys and puts into question the old model of thinking that only one side could win and the other side loses. Now, there are some strategies I want to talk about. Let me grab this eraser again. There are some strategies. There's a guy named Herb Cohen. He wrote a book called You Can Negotiate Anything. That was a pretty interesting read, but I would suggest to you that in Mr. Cohen's world of negotiation, there were losers and winners. He gives one story. He walks into a Macy's-type department store. Now, most of us think that if you go into a Macy's or Neiman Marcus, you can't really negotiate price, right? If there's a sticker on a suit that you like, that's how much it's going to cost. So Mr. Cohen was going to be giving a speech to thousands of people, and he needed a new suit. And I think he was in New York City. It doesn't really matter. And he didn't want to pay any more than $400 for a new suit. He knew that. That was sort of what his must-have was. And I'm going to talk about must-haves and wants in a moment. But when Mr. Cohen walked into that Macy's department store, his intent was to purchase a nice new suit for $400. Well, the least expensive suit he could find off the rack was like $560. But he told the salesperson that, hey, you know what? I love this suit. Can you please call the tailor from downstairs to come up, and I want you to measure the suit. The sleeves are a little bit long, and the legs needed to be hemmed. Well, the tailor came up from downstairs, where those tailors hang out, measured the guy, probably spent about 15, 20 minutes with Mr. Cohen, and after all the pins were in place, and after the suit was all chalked up, Mr. Cohen said, well, you know what, I really love this suit, but the most I'm going to pay is $400. And he claims that the salesperson talked to the manager and got that price approved, because there was so much time invested in that transaction that the salesperson was willing to make a change to modify the typical role where you go to Macy's or Neiman Marcus and you simply just pay the price that's being asked. So Mr. Cohen claims that you could have a win-lose situation or a win-win situation by trying to get whatever you want, by having the other party invest a lot of time with you and get your price. I don't really know if it works. That was his concept. I would argue to you that that's probably an old model of thinking. However, what we will try to reach are some strategy points here, and that's what I want you to think about. So before you ever even go into the negotiation, just like planning a pitch, I know you guys have some pitches coming up pretty soon, the more you plan, the more successful you're going to be, right? The more you rehearse your pitch in front of a camera or with friends, the potential for you to be very glib and persuasive is much higher. The opportunity for you to avoid non-words or filler words like and or you know is going to escalate the more you practice. Now, this is also true for negotiation. I would argue that the more you prepare ahead of time, the more successful your negotiation could be. So with that in mind, let me give you some rules and some strategies that you should engage upon before you even walk into the room. All right? So, rule number 1, know your bottom line, or know your must-haves. Again, maybe it's price, maybe it's delivery, maybe it's something else. But you have to know this before you walk in the room. Secondly, what are your wants? Right? In a perfect world, what do you want to come away with? You need to be cognizant of those before you walk in the room. Now, there are some strategies that we talk about, and these strategies pretty much relate to the old way that we conceptualize negotiation. Some of them will still work today. So, one strategy is to say that you have no authority. So like, I'm sorry. Sorry, Josh, was it? Sorry, Josh, you know, I'd love to sell you this car, but I really have no authority, and you're going to have to wait till my boss gets back into town. Now, as a personal injury attorney, several years ago, if I was in the same room with an insurance company representative, I told them up front before they even walked in the room, says, don't pull that trick where you're going to tell me you have no authority, because you'll be wasting my time. Only come into the room if you can come up with $500,000. If you don't have authority of up to $500,000, you're wasting my time and I'm going to walk out. So up front, you should be able to establish if the parties that are sitting across the table have the authority. If they don't, you're probably wasting your time, right? If they don't have the authority to make a deal, why are you sitting there? This is not a practice, because often people that are using bad faith will engage in a negotiation just to learn stuff about you, right? To try to get some information. Maybe they're playing you off a competitor. Who knows? But if they're not there in good faith, you want to check that out the door. The other strategy that's often used is something called the bad cop, good cop. So, let's say that Josh and I are going into this negotiation, and I'm going to be the nice guy, right? I'm going to pretty much tell the other side they can have almost anything they want, right? Almost anything they're going to ask for, I'm going to capitulate and say, okay, no problem. Josh is going to be the bad guy saying, nah, I don't really think we can do that. We'd love to earn your business, but it just doesn't make financial sense for us to do that. But if we are going to use the strategy, the good cop, bad cop, we better know what our must-haves are at the end of the day, right? Because if one of us is sort of overdoing our role, we're getting a little bit too zealous about our particular role, and we've lost sight of what our bottom lines are, then everything could fail. Our concepts could jettison out the window. So, before you go into the negotiation, again, make sure that the other side has authority. And if you're going to use the bad cop, good cop idea, make sure you're on the same page. Now, similar to the no authority is to walk away. The concept of walk away. It's like, I'm sorry, you know, this is ridiculous. We're so far apart on this deal, I'm walking away. Now, this could be used effectively, but make sure if you're going to walk away, you really don't want that deal to happen, right? Because if you walk away on an important client, chances are they may never give you another opportunity. Often in business, when we're negotiating contracts, we're dealing with an opponent in the old days, or an adversary in the old days, but a partner in the new days going forward. We could be doing business with a partner that we're going to see again very soon. So why would we want to alienate somebody by walking away today if we know we need their them for another business transaction later. Okay? So any questions about these strategies so far? Anything unclear? All right, now I want to break down just a few more things about contract negotiation, and then we're going to actually do a practicum, a little assignment that I want everybody to try. All right, so I'm not going to be able to teach you everything you need to know about contract law, but I want to teach you some core elements. Because most of the time, we are going to be negotiating contracts. And usually it's for the purchase or the sale of a commodity. Now, if you're involved in the purchase and sale of a commodity, one thing that you could do is offer incentives to the seller. All right? You can offer an incentive. One interesting incentive that I've used before is that if you avoid changing the legal terms of our contract, I'm going to give you a 5% bonus at the end of the contracting period. Because if you start trying to mess around with the legal terms, that means I'm going to have to go to my legal team or hire outside counsel, and it's going to make the whole transaction more expensive. So I will offer this 5% bonus up front and say, hey, look, at the end of today, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to engage in a contract. I hope that we get a deal today. And if you like our contract the way it's written and you sign off on it, I'm going to give you a 5% bonus based on the overall value of the contract just to leave the contract alone. Now, there are obviously many other types of incentives that you can give and bonuses. If I'm asking for a 6-month delivery term and you can come up with a 5-month delivery, that's going to make me happy, and I'm going to give you a 10% bonus. Now, all these things are negotiable, right? So one thing that Mr. Cohn said in his book that is true is that you can negotiate anything. What's the worst that's going to happen? If you ask for something, you know, if you're asking somebody in your family, do you want to go to Italy this summer, and they wanted to go to Madrid, you can negotiate. They might say no, but it's worth negotiating. So in a contract, we have 3 main elements: offer, acceptance, and consideration. This contract formation is an all or nothing proposition. What's your name, sir? What's your name? Dimitri. I like Dimitri's shirt, and I might offer to buy Dimitri's shirt for $500, right? I've never seen such a cool shirt in my life. I want that shirt. I'm going to offer him $500. Now, Dimitri can do several things, right? He could say no. I'm not interested in selling my shirt. I love this shirt. It means a lot to me. A loved one gave it to me. It has a lot of sentimental value. Dimitri's going to say, I don't want to sell the shirt. That's one possibility. The other thing Dimitri could do is something called a counter offer. Says, oh, okay, you're willing to pay me $500 for this shirt? How about $750? Now, what has he done? As a result of his counter offer, he's rejected my offer, and he's proposed a new offer. Initially, I was the offeror. Initially, I was making the offer to buy his shirt, and he was the offeree. Now he's changed things around. Now he's negotiating with me, right? He's understood that I want his shirt, and I'm willing to pay up to $500, so why not try to make a little bit more money on the deal? And now he's saying, how about $750? Once he rejects my offer, once he gives me the counter offer, my deal's off the table. He can't come back and say, well, do you still want my shirt for $500 after he's rejected my offer? I might say, well, okay, I still like your shirt. Even though you're trying to squeeze some money out of me, I still love Dimitri's shirt, and I'll pay $500. But legally speaking, once he's made that counter offer, he's rejected my offer, and now he's made a new offer. You probably heard the term counteroffer before. It's actually a two-part transaction. First, he has to reject my offer, and now he's making the offer. And as you know, when the person who's making the offer, the offeror, they are the master of the offer. So I said, okay, Dimitri, I like your shirt. Sounds like we've got a deal for $500. How would you like to be paid? He says, well, I want you to put $500 in my PayPal account. I said, man, I only have cash on me. He said, sorry, if you want the shirt, you got to put it in my PayPal account. Now, it probably wouldn't really happen. He'd probably take the cash and run out the door. What's that? Bitcoin. Bitcoin, yeah, even better. Okay, so he is the master of his offer. If we live in different areas, he can say he wants me to ship the money to him somehow, and I want him to ship the shirt to me. Or maybe we can arrange to get it in person. But the concept here is when you're in a negotiation, just because somebody makes you an offer doesn't mean you have to accept it. You can make a counter offer. You can reject their offer and suggest a new offer on new and different terms. Now, one final comment before I'm going to explain what exercise I want us to do, because I want to spend us a good deal of time on that. And that is that some contracts must be in writing to be valid. It's called the statute of frauds. Anybody know why the common law courts in Great Britain insisted on having certain contracts in writing? Anybody? Well, I'll tell you. Certain contracts are more important than others and are more subject to fraud. So, as an example, in California, any transaction in real estate must be in writing. Tell me your name, sir. Matt. Matt wants to rent this building for me, right? Let's say it's available. That has to be in writing because that's a transaction. Rental of real estate needs to be in writing. A contract that can't possibly be performed within 1 year must be in writing. Now, can anybody in the room think of a contract that can't possibly be performed within 1 year? I'm not saying highly unlikely. Many people say, well, to build a building. That's probably unlikely, but it is possible. Tell me your name again, sir. Nick.
We're getting a contract together where you must fund me consecutively every day for 366 days.
Okay. So that would be a pretty impossible contract to perform. Very good, Nick. The other example I usually give is that Matt is going to be throwing me a birthday party, and he's planning to throw me a birthday party for my 80th birthday. Now, I may not look it, but I'm not close to 80. That would be impossible to perform within a year, right? Because I'm not going to be 80 for many, many more years. So that contract must also be in writing. Also, a contract that answers for the debt of another. Nick says, you know what, Mr. Silberman, yeah, you can buy my shirt, but I owe Matt $500, so I want you to pay him $500. That would have to be in writing because now that contract answers for the debt between Dimitri and Matt. That would be a completely different deal. That must be in writing. So contracts that relate to real property, transaction in real estate, contracts that can't be performed within 1 year, contracts that call for the debt of another, and also contracts that are worth more than $500. So if I sold you my car and I have a Rolls Royce out there that's worth $110,000, that's going to have to be in writing to be valid. Okay? Any questions about contracts before we move on to the final practicum for today's lesson? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to split up into two groups. And I hope everybody will participate. I'm not going to force you to, but I tell you that this is probably the most meaningful part of today's lesson. I can stand up here and lecture you about great negotiation tactics and strategy all day long, but if you do it, that is the best way to learn. Learn by doing. This is unbelievably the best. So, we're going to have two teams. We're going to have a seller's team and a buyer's team. And I recommend that each team has a team captain, or you can have a couple captains. The other thing is that you always have the right on your teams to do what we call a caucus. That means that maybe one of the team has thrown you a curveball, right? One of the teams has thrown you a curveball, and now you have the right to regroup and actually come back to the negotiation after one team has thrown you a curveball. So you can caucus in private with your group and then come back. You know, actually, we have a pretty large group today. I think we're going to do 4 groups. So 2 buyers group and 2 sellers groups. And I'll number you off in a minute. But this is what's going to happen. The buyers are interested in purchasing a software contract, and the sellers are obviously interested in selling a software contract. Now, these are just some guideposts. Everything is going to be negotiable, but if I give you parameters that are too close, it's not going to be very much fun. So I'm going to put the parameters sort of at a significant distance from another. So the buyers want to buy the software program for $50,000. And by the way, this software program is for automation in a factory. So it's in the manufacturing segment, manufacturing plant, and this will automate your process. So the buyers are interested in purchasing the software for $50,000. The sellers want to sell it for $120,000. The buyers want 6-month delivery. Now remember, this is a customized software program. The buyers need it in 6 months. The sellers want 1 year to deliver, to get all the bugs out. The buyers want unlimited support, technical support. And the sellers want to provide Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 chat support. And finally, the buyers want unlimited licenses, that anybody could use the software. They're a growing company. Right now, they have at least 50 people that need to use this. But they want to be able to expand and have unlimited licensing. And the sellers want to sell 25 licenses. OK, is everybody clear on what the transaction is? Yes?
So sellers want to buy, sellers want to sell for 120K? And then 1 year for the contract for, what does that mean, like the 1 year?
1 year delivery time.
Oh, delivery.
Yeah, so they want to be able to come back here. Let's say Draper's buying the program just for the heck of it. This is our fictitious company. They want it installed. The sellers say we need up to a year to install it because it's custom. And because our reputation's on the line, we want to make sure it's bug-free before we give it to you.
And then once the year's up, that's the times that we're going to be there for, like, support?
Yeah. After the year's up, then they're going to be available. The buyers want unlimited support, and they're saying they will provide support Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Now, you can also negotiate for training if you want. That's not up there. I'm not going to list every possible item that could go up there because I want you to think out of the box and come up with other things that could come up. What was your name, sir?
Tommy Espinoza.
Tom?
Tommy.
Tommy, are we clear? Yes, sir. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to split you up into 4 groups. You'll either be a buyer or a seller. So my 1s are going to be buyers. My 2s are going to be sellers. And they will be negotiating against each other, theoretically, or with each other in the new model. Yes, sir.
We actually have groups already, groups of 6. Would that be a problem if we actually go into our default group?
6 in each group?
Let's switch it up.
Yeah, let's switch.
Yeah, let's switch it up. It's a new day, right? It's March 2nd. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So, can we know about how much value or like how much money that program saves for the factory? So basically, to be some place
Okay,
to speak around.
I can tell you this, that the buyers claim they have a competitor vendor that's willing to deliver the same product for $50,000. What it's going to save the company, I'm not sure. That's speculative.
Yeah, but like if I'm a seller, can I like estimate? Okay, if they buy my company for like hundreds, if they buy my product, they would save like $1 million annually.
That's fine. Say $1 million. Over the next 2 years, if they implement that software, they'll save $1 million. That's fine. Now, some of these things you can think of in your huddle. So back to these teams. My 1s, buyers, and 2 sellers, that will be 1 negotiating group. And then 3 buyers. If you're 3, you'll be a buyer, and 4, you'll be a seller. Now, what I want us to do after I break you up into groups, take about 10 to 15 minutes and plan the negotiation. Find out what your must-haves are going to be, what your likes are going to be. Maybe you're willing to compromise on price, but you're not willing to compromise on delivery. Yes, sir. Yeah.
What do we base those must-haves on?
Just with your team.
What does that mean? Like we just make it up?
Yeah, it's pretty subjective. I don't know if you've heard of PNAFTA before. That's like pulling numbers out of thin air. It's just sort of off the top of your head. However stubborn you want to be. You might want to be very stubborn on delivery time, but you're flexible on price. That's something your group can decide. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it could be that you won't be able to come up with a deal, but it's more about the process than actually what you come up with. I saw your hand, but I saw this gentleman's hand first. What was your answer?
So you don't have any like vested interests? Are we organically just going to meet in the middle of all these?
You could be. Yeah, if your team decides, okay, let's just set it down the middle, like a Silberman type gesture, you could do that.
Or you can be stubborn.
But it's more about the process of listening and asking questions. So when we're actually doing our negotiation, I like to walk around the room and hear people saying, you know, Matt, what does it look like for you to win today? Or Dimitri, you know, if we came up with a year delivery time, are you willing to give up the support terms? That kind of stuff.
So you kind of want us to kind of make up false constraints so that in the negotiation we can discover what the constraints of the other side is and then through that negotiate.
Right.
Okay.
But you'll be able to ask questions too. I mean, at the very beginning, if you want to adopt this new type of negotiation model, you can say, what do you guys want? I've seen teams hammer out deals like this by just asking what the other team wants, and they acquiesce. So you can play it that way too. Yes, sir. What was your name?
Yeah, Chris.
Chris.
I'm just wondering, like, if we can actually walk away from the deal, like, make
Sure. You can use any strategy you want. You can use a good cop, bad cop. You can use no authority. You can walk away. Say, this is ridiculous. I'm not staying here. You can. You can walk away. You can be done. Yeah. You can go watch Oprah upstairs. I don't care. Whatever you do. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before we split up into groups? All right. So if you're a 1, you're a buyer, 2 seller. You're going to be with the 1s will be with the 2s, and the 3s will be with the 4s. Okay. I'm just going to arbitrarily 1, 2.